Oh man, this is cool. All right. Nobody's here, but I will talk anyway. See if anybody pops in to check this out. Let me see if I can update some things on here. So right now I'm just sort of exploring with the D&D Beyond overlay. I want to take a look. Oh, that's cool. Very cool, very cool. That's neat. All right, let me see some things here. Oh, just learning how to use Twitch here. We had our first stream yesterday. There we go. Just trying to update the stream here. I'm totally new to all of this, so I'm kind of trying to learn as I go. Did that change it? Okay, cool. I see it there now. Awesome. Where do I pull up the chat on here? I don't know how. Oh, there it is. Okay. Do a pop out. I'm going to try doing this too. That's not what I want. Yeah, I don't know how well this is working out right now. I'm just trying to set it up for the first time ever. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's see. Let me switch up here a little bit. All right. Well, I don't know. I think I got most of what I want working here. Let me turn off the D&D Beyond overlay for right now, because we don't need it for right now. But anyway, I'm just gonna kind of go over a little bit of yesterday's session. So yesterday, first off, hey, I'm Shane. My son and I play a regular Dungeons and Dragons game that we stream. We started off on YouTube and now we came over to Twitch. Right now, I want to kind of start doing something that I've seen some people do. I know people want to see more of it out there. So if anybody knows somebody that plays Dungeons and Dragons and wants to get like a DM perspective about what goes on during a game, kind of like a review of their thought process, how they plan, all kinds of things like that. That's sort of what I want this to turn into. So I just yesterday jotted down a few quick notes about the game that we had, a quick overview of what we did. So if you've seen our show on YouTube or you watched yesterday on Twitch, my son plays, we're playing a duet game. So that's just two people, Dungeon Master and a player. We are using a few sort of optional rules that are seen in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And the one that really stands out is the sidekick rules that specifically were featured originally in the Essentials kit that we got. And I've actually been running through that adventure with a online after school group that I play as well. But we've been using the sidekick rules, me and Tristan, for a bit during this Saturday Morning Wartoons show. Also, I created a magic item that requires attunement called the Bracers of Bahamut, which basically allows for Tristan to use another optional rule in the DMG, which is hero points. So I will go ahead. And I want to pop up on D&D Beyond here. So let me just kind of change. There we go. So here I am on D&D Beyond. I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. You know what? Let me do something real quick. We'll hide that. Go to my campaign. So, sorry, I didn't want to post my campaign up there so that anyone and everyone can see it. Didn't want the campaign link getting thrown out, so I can always change it after if I end up showing it. So, but here, so I created this magic item, and I made it so it requires attunement, so that he would have the choice down the road if he wanted to keep using it. He hasn't been using it very much lately, but basically this uses the rules from the DMG for hero points. So I just made it a magic item so that he has the option to switch out and not use these hero points or upgrade to something better down the road. But I mostly just wanted to see if he would use this optional rule. So any newly attuned character gets 5 hero points to use. Player can spend a hero point whenever he or she makes an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. Player can spend the hero point after the roll is made, but before any of its results are applied. Spending the hero point allows the player to roll a d6 and add it to the d20, possibly turning a failure into a success. A player can spend only 1 hero point per roll. So basically it just gives him an opportunity to maybe hit a character with a slightly higher armor class, or make a save that he normally wouldn't be able to. So it gives certain options for a character to use. Whenever a character fails a death saving throw, the player can spend 1 hero point to turn the failure into a success. Obviously, playing a 1-player game, if all you're doing is making death saving throws, it's not going to be a lot of fun. So I just wanted to make sure that he can get out of being unconscious pretty quickly. Playing with a sidekick, he still can be involved in the action if the sidekick is still up, but it's still not a lot of fun to see your only character drop. Also, when attuned, character levels up, and if they remain attuned to the bracers, any unspent hero points are lost, so you can't have them roll over. The character gets new hero points equal to 5 plus the character's level. Now, Tristan has not been using these bracers a lot. In fact, we kind of respect his character a little bit. Originally, he started off doing Blood Hunter, but a lot of what he wanted to do wasn't vibing with the Blood Hunter class, so we decided to go with a Kensei Monk build. So he has his retractable arm blade, scimitar, which he also has to attune to, so any arm blade has to be attuned to. He's also unarmored, which I think is really fun if you're thinking about like a robot build, essentially what a Warforged is, because it allows you to kind of play around with not having to deal with a lot of equipment. So especially if there's any kinds of special properties in an armor, if you need attunement, it's just that much less to attune to. Plus, I think what I might end up having him do, he wanted to use the gunner feat, so he's been wanting to have guns and things like that, which I'm fine with, because honestly, in my world, it's a homebrew world that I've made over the last 4 years. It's kind of a Vancian type of homebrew world. So there's a lot of, hey T, sorry, just saw you there. But it's a very Vancian type of thing, so there's more technology than you would expect in a typical D&D world, because it is so far into the future. Technology still exists. In fact, I explained to Tristan about Jack Vance and the whole history of how that relates to Dungeons and Dragons, and how, in my mind, this world takes place in the far future. Like when civilizations have risen and fallen, society has collapsed, and the world kind of reverts back into a new Dark Ages, where all of this ancient technology is now seen as magic. So all of these things that we think of in D&D as magic is really just some sort of technological entity. Of course, there is still the arcane and the gods, things like that, gods, goddesses, all of the divine aspects to it. All of that exists still. I don't try to explain how any of that exists in a far future, but it does. So I don't spend a lot of time sweating the details on that. That I think may be shaped over time in the world. Because one of my philosophies when it comes to DMing, especially in my homebrew world, is I let the players create the world that we are playing in just as much as I create. Even when we started, I basically laid out a map for my players, a really basic black and white, little bit of color. I laid it out there, said, hey, this is the world we're in. Where do you want to be from? I've got a couple city names. I've got ideas of what these cities are, types of things that happen in the world, but what do you want? What do you want for your characters in this world? And we can kind of piece that in. And so even as we're playing the game, this is my campaign for some friends that I play with. As we were running the campaign, we were just sort of making up new locations, people in the world, and I would just kind of make it up as we go because honestly, when you play with a bunch of murder hobos, it gets pretty hectic. They really go off the beaten path a lot of times and stir up things that shouldn't be stirred up. And so that puts me in an awkward position a lot of times as DM. So I have the main story beats in a typical campaign that I would like to go to. I have key NPCs, but other than that, I kind of let it be a sandbox for my players. The last campaign I ran, I had to create that sandbox on an island just so that it was a lot more difficult for them to get off the beaten path too far. But for the most part, I think it's worked out. And I explained to Tristan, I was like, look, yeah, this is you're unique in your world. In my campaign, I never had Warforged. I started building this before Eberron was really a thing. So I had never placed Warforged characters into my world. So he's sort of the first. I am planning something along that lines story-wise where he is perhaps not the only one of his kind, and I think that could be really fun. But that's sort of what I've had to explain to him is that there is that he and I are kind of creating this world together. So kind of went off on a tangent there, but anyway, so the Bracers of Bahamut here, one of the many attuned items that I am going to pass along towards Tristan, the other one being that will come very soon is I found Warforged have access to a sort of wand canister in their arm that they can use. I thought that would be kind of fun to play with, give him a chance to... He really wants to cast spells. He wants to be able to cast spells. And there is a means for me to do that. So I might have him. He can still wear the bracers, but just unattuned to them, because the bracers are also a symbol for the royal family of which he's a part of. So that's just something that I'm hoping he can really enjoy. I think he would have more fun with a wand attachment than the bracers that he's got going on right now. I might even incorporate the wand into the bracers and eliminate the hero point rule altogether. So just a thought on that. So anyway, our campaign basically is he's a superhero. That's the only way I could think of to run a one-player campaign. He's a superhero. He controls a sidekick who is like his Robin to the main character's Batman. So he likes to play off of that. I've also given him another sidekick. This time, the first sidekick is a kobold expert. And so what that allows for is a lot more fun in melee combat, I think, because the expert has an ability where they allow the help action as a bonus action. And I think that could be really useful, especially in combat where a monk gets advantage on their first attack. That could be really devastating, especially for a Kensei. So that would be really fun. Also, I recently gave him access to a healer who, story-wise, I was kind of off and on about this because story-wise, this character is a simulacrum, so a arcane copy of a gnomish wizard. And so the reason I kind of toyed around with that is, okay, so if this is a simulacrum, technically they're supposed to have the same abilities as a lower level version of that arcane caster. I could probably retroactively come up with the idea for that, but I thought I had initially just made it a healer because that's what was needed at the time. He, being a solo player, he needed access to some sort of healer. It took a little while for him to get access to that sidekick because I had to teach him a little lesson about not being a bully to people in the world. I had to remind him that the character he's playing, he's a lawful good, basically superhero who is trying to fight the evil forces of Tiamat. That's the main story. He's trying to figure out a way to banish Tiamat using a cubic gate. Even though Tiamat is still in Avernus, the cubic gate that he had that was supposed to be used to lock away Tiamat is also now lost in Avernus. So eventually the campaign is going to come to a head with him trying to go for that original goal that he had. But in the meantime, we're just sort of trying to get him in levels up and things like that. Oh yeah, no, yeah, thanks. I think that's a good way for me to teach him because he's a real sweet kid, but he sometimes just gets lost in his own imagination and he gets a little wacky, cartoony type of behavior and things like that. But one of the things that I'm trying to do with Dungeons and Dragons, especially with this company, Behold Enrichment, is trying to use it as a way to teach emotional and social development. Something that, unfortunately, with the past year, kids being locked away, it got, lost on a lot of kids. And when you see a kid interact with their siblings, it's very different than how they interact with friends or even strangers. And so I've been trying to make it feel a little bit like that in this game. So hopefully he can take some of those lessons and find some use with them. Let me see here. I want to switch this really quickly, so I'm gonna close that off. All right, so let's take a look at his character because we remade parts of it here. All right, so back up. We remade parts of his character. We completely changed the class. He still wanted to be a Warforged, and I thought that was fine. That's cool. And with the changes in the rules for sidekicks in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, I thought it would be a lot easier if he were just more straight up fighter. One of the problems that we had with his character originally, and we found this out after playing, was that his bonus actions were getting passed by. Basically, he wanted to be a dual wielder. He wanted to have two weapons, and he wanted to use that extra bonus action to use his extra scimitar. He wanted to dual wield scimitars, one an arm blade, one just a scimitar. So what we found is with the Warforged class, or with the the Bloodhunter class, the bonus actions were having to be too focused on spells that were coming up and other spell-like abilities from the class, rather than using his weapons and his attacks. He wants to be like basically a dual-wielding ninja type of thing. So I talked to him about it. We rearranged his dexterity and intelligence scores a little bit, a couple others here and there, basically allowing him to increase his dexterity, lower his intelligence, and we decided to go with a monk class instead. And so he's got his arm blade scimitar, and his bonus actions, if we can check here, his bonus actions are actually a lot more in line of what he wants. So he can move around the battlefield. He can fight big monsters and get away from them, which is something that we featured yesterday. The first encounter that he had was a giant. Now, one thing I'm doing with the NPCs, especially the enemies in this world for right now, is I'm using minimum HP. So basically, I'm just taking the minimum amount of hit points that they can have so that they're a little easier to bring down. If I want the battle to go on, if it's looking really cool and he's having fun, I'll push it back. What I typically do when I do the math for damage taken and things like that is I don't subtract from a total HP. I just keep a tally of how much total damage has been done. And that way, if it looks like the battle is going south, I can just cut it off and stop it right there. If it looks like we're having fun like we did yesterday, even after he got knocked out, I can keep it going. I can, just let it run for a little while longer, let him have a few extra turns so that he can show off some of his cool abilities and things like that. He's still trying to get used to the characters, so I've been kind of lenient on damage. One other option I use, and this is something I carried over from 4th edition D&D, is I use minions, basically. If you think about when you watch a superhero movie, before they get to the big bad guy, there's always just a bunch of henchmen that they're mowing through. One hit, that person's down. Think about something like the Avengers. There's this massive battle going on, and you've got this small fighting force. So how do you make it so that large fighting force is formidable, but still defeatable? And that's why I think minions are such a cool option. Basically, it's whatever NPC you have with just one hit point. So for him, fighting off a cult of Tiamat's followers, using minion rules is perfect because they can damage him, they can chip away at him, kind of feels exhausted by the time he gets to the big bad guy, but he's mowed through so many people, he feels really good. He's having a lot of fun. So I like using those minion rules. So that's just one of the things that I like about how to play the game with that optional rule. I'm not even sure. Are minion rules in the DMG? We can check that out. Let me pop on and take a look. Minions. Okay, so Volo's Guide to Monsters has something. Let me see. Oh, this is for Kenku. Okay, never mind. Not seeing. Let's see, allies, minions, and pets. This is for kobolds. Okay. No, I don't know. I don't think they even have rules about minions anywhere. Yeah. So it looks like minions are not even something that are an option in 5th edition. But yeah, so that's one thing I like to do, especially for that 2-player game, because it makes it feel like he's able to do a lot more. Let's see. Okay, so let me just finally recap yesterday's game. So just coming off of a fight with a white, which was pretty challenging for him, just because the white has a pretty it's pretty bulky and it can eat up a lot of damage. Oh yeah, minions are in Star Wars. Yeah, I don't think it's on D&D Beyond at all. Yeah, wild shapes and familiars. Let me see. You can actually, I can show you. For anybody that is interested in playing with any kind of summons or familiars, anything like that, you can actually do that in D&D Beyond. It doesn't work so well with the sidekicks yet. They haven't really figured out how to do it with the sidekicks, because in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the sidekicks basically are able to assume the stat block of their class and also have access to abilities in the stat block for the NPC that you choose. So what I mean by that is, so if you are making a sidekick, you basically are able to choose an NPC of, I think, a half CR or lower. I think it's in here. We can look at it. So sidekick right here. Oh, hold on. Let me turn this back on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm in this extras tab. So you have in your character sheet, this is just an NPC or a character that I made just for fun. So you have your actions, spells, equipment, features, traits, description, notes, extras. Extras is on the side. I actually have a YouTube video about this too. But you just go to manage extras, choose your category. There's a drop down box here, or a drop down menu, and you can choose from one of those. So what I have here is the different types of sidekicks that you can use. Now, like I said, the sidekicks, they don't have a way where you can incorporate the 2 stat blocks together. So what I've been doing, so if I want to use a spellcaster healer, I add that, and then you can edit it. So basically, you're using this stat block for the sidekick, but you can also use abilities from the NPC stat block. So, for example, I will go to miscellaneous. And here you can choose anything up to half CR. So you can kind of browse, take a look at things. So you could technically even have an awakened shrub, all kinds of different creatures. They recently did a new episode on Dragon Talk with Jeremy Crawford, where they talked about how to use the new sidekick rules. The only requirements in sidekicks when choosing an NPC stat block is language. For the spellcaster and experts, they need to be able to speak at least one language. And he even says too, things like being able to communicate telepathically will count as language. So let's see here. So I have a spellcaster healer. I could choose perhaps to use a, let's see, I want to see a good one here. Let's see, where is a good one? Yeah, none of these can speak a language, all of these giant things. I think an ice method can, does it? Nah, it doesn't show. Yeah, oh, let's go, Merfolk, perfect. Okay, so basically, with the sidekick, I've been having to use two stat blocks. The stat block for the NPC itself, and you combine that with the stat block over here. What I've been doing for purposes on D&D Beyond is I've been keeping both up. One of them is miscellaneous, one of them is the sidekick. And just sort of keep in mind what abilities are there. The only thing you have to worry about with a merfolk is the amphibious ability. As for the ability scores, go with the sidekick. Go with the sidekick ability scores because they're usually more geared towards what you are doing. So that's really the only thing that I could say about that. But anyway, so back to the campaign. Yeah, Tristan's been having a lot of fun with these sidekick rules. He fought off that giant, and I've had to cut back on the HP of all of these bigger, badder monsters that he fights, just to help keep the action moving. Because when you have 5 players against one big opponent, the damage output is always a lot higher on the player end per turn than it is on the enemy end per turn, and they can only target usually one character at a time or just a small group. And so a lot of times you'll see tactically the players will put themselves in positions to avoid being hit by area of effect attacks and things like that. So after he first encountered this giant, turn 1 he got knocked out. I was expecting him to try to split up a little bit, maybe not get hit that hard right away, but I didn't fudge the rolls on that because there are always story ways out of it, especially when he's traveling with a group of others. So the way I explained it, he rushed up ahead, tried to fight off this giant on his own with his sidekick. They weren't able to do it, and he ended up getting knocked out turn 1. Other allies came. I kind of retconned the story so that it's the other people were able to draw the giant far away, so that they could revive him, allow him time to rest and recover a little bit, and then give them time to escape. So I figured escape would be a good option for him, seeing how dangerous this giant was. Nope. He did not want to run away. He wanted to go fight this thing. He wanted to go back and take it on his own. So I let him do it. If that's what you want, go for it. Give it a shot. So he went back, tried to fight off this giant, and ended up succeeding. I didn't have to take away much of the HP off this giant, but he went in and he came up with a really good plan. I figured I'd let him try it out, see what he came up with. and he succeeded. He ended up beating this giant, hands down. I didn't do a whole lot to fudge numbers or anything, but he did great. He did good. So being able to kind of let him do that felt really good. It also gave him a chance to learn his abilities as a character. He is still kind of new to the monk class. We had just sort of revamped his character, and so I wanted to let him kind of experiment, see what he could do with his character, things like that. And he got to try out a lot of different things. I gave him advice a few times along the way. He is so young and new to the game. I don't really hold back on giving him advice. Especially, he's not a very strategic thinker. He doesn't plan ahead. He doesn't try to come up with plans. And it's a lot harder when you're just playing on your own. You know, when you're playing with a group of people, you have an opportunity to bounce ideas off of each other. But when it's just you and a dungeon master, I feel as a dungeon master, I could be that person to be like, oh, no, this might not be the best idea. Or you might want to try this. You have this ability. I remind him of what abilities he has and show him what could be an optimum use of his abilities. So that's one thing I do. There was one point where I just told him flat out, I was like, you could do a strike, an unarmed strike. Okay, so let me pull up his character sheet here again. Let me pull it up. All right, so we will take a look at his character sheet. Okay, so there was one point where he was in combat, and I told him his armor class is 18. He got the benefits, I think it was a bless spell. He got +2 to his armor class. And then I showed him, I was like, you could do an agile parry. So right here. If you make an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn and are holding a Kensei weapon, you can use it to defend yourself if it is a melee weapon. You gain +2 bonus to armor class until the start of your next turn while the weapon is in your hand and you aren't incapacitated. So I told him basically, so with the bless, or it might have been, it was a shield type of spell, I forget which one. But it gave him a bonus of +2 to his armor class for 10 minutes. Might be Divine Shield. So his armor class was already 20, and I told him, okay, if you want, you can use your unarmed strike during your attack action, use your bonus action to do your weapon attack, because that way you could still have the potential to deal all that damage. And then you would have an armor class of 22 until your next turn. And with a giant having a +8 bonus to their attack, every little bit of armor class helps. And so we did the math and broke it down. So I told him, basically what I would need to roll in order to hit him. And he thought that was a great idea. And I thought he would do that the whole battle, but he didn't. It worked out in the end. He really likes using his flurry of blows. He loves to do flurry of blows, apparently. He even got a chance to use his Step of the Wind. One thing we haven't really done yet is the Kensei shot. I brought it up to him, and he thought about doing it, but we ended up not in the end. He also wants to use more of his deflect missiles, so I think the next session you're going to see a lot more people firing either arrows, bolts, something like that. So look forward for that. Also, he hasn't, excuse me, he hasn't had the chance to use his slow fall, and I really want to feature that. He also has the gunner ability. So this is something that he really wanted, and I thought, what the heck, we could put it in the story there. So he doesn't need to worry about the loading property for firearms, which is really fun. I think his let me check. So his crossbow, light crossbow, is a two-handed weapon. The pistol is a one-handed weapon. So he could technically be firing off his pistol while using his scimitar. I'm going to have to double check the rules on this, but I think that's mostly what he wants to do. He wants to be able to use his pistol and his scimitar and his unarmed strikes during his turn. He is, I think, mostly waiting to get his second attack action, so that he can do all kinds of cool different things as a monk. And I think monk is a great class for a single player. But I haven't really let him use the pistol because I wanted him to try out the monk abilities. So story-wise, what I told him is, you don't have the ammunition. You spent all of your time, you just found this pistol. And he found it right around the time when he leveled up. And so I told him when he took the feat, you get this pistol and you're going to spend a whole day training on it so that this feat sort of makes sense story-wise. Because you don't just, get a pistol and all of a sudden you know how to use it, you're proficient, all of that. So I incorporated it into that long rest when he was leveling up. And it worked out because there were other companions that needed to be healed and the area needed to be scouted, so he took some time, trained with the weapon, and that's how we explained that feat. The other thing that I like about how we sort of delayed having that pistol being used, that moment I mentioned earlier in the stream where he was not being so kind to one of the other NPCs, they were the ones that gave him the pistol, and they had the extra ammunition for him to have after he was trained and proficient with it. But because of his behavior, one, I didn't let them become a sidekick right away, and two, they withheld that ammunition. So story-wise, it worked out okay. You see. Oh, not that. All right. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Let me change this up. There we go. All right. So yeah, that's kind of what happened with that pistol. So after he ends up fighting this giant, we had a couple of really cool and funny moments. One, and I like to animate it for him because he has a very vivid imagination, so I like to create a very visual description of things that he does. So at one moment, the giant chucks a rock, and I had a really bad die, I guess, in the second half of that battle. So this giant chucks this rock, and it goes nat 1, flies way overhead. Tristan had just run away from the giant, had just used the disengage action and tried to run away. I also started playing the giant as low intelligence, not very tactically sound, so it was just doing whatever was in... I started playing a little dumbed down tactically. I didn't do what was ideal at the time. So rather than follow him, melee attack him twice, I decided, let's just chuck a rock, see what happens. So nat 1, and I really got Tristan into the battle at this point, I think. This is when it really started to click for him. I described his character run away, and he says that he wanted to stop and turn and face the giant again. And so after I nat 1, I said, okay, so you run. and you turn, and he described it specifically. I want to dig my arm blade into the ground to stop myself when I get to the end of my movement. And so this giant chucks this rock at him, and all of a sudden flies overhead him. Big explosion from behind him. He's got his arm blade in the ground, and I kind of describe it from the giant's perspective, where he digs his arm blade into the ground, and this big explosion of grass and dirt and dust behind him. And I could see he's picturing it in his head, and he just loves it. He's really into that moment. And so then on the next turn, I think it was the next turn or 2 turns later, he goes back up and he wants to run up and punch the dragon, or punch the giant in the face. So he ends up succeeding. So I end up having him just run up the face of the leg of the dragon, and punch it in the face. And he's super excited about that, getting all into the game. And one of the best moments, I think, came right after that. He wanted to roll under the giant's legs. And just out of the blue, he says, he's like, it's really disgusting down there, but I'm going to roll underneath his legs. And so we had a really fun interaction there, where it's basically, I make the dragon fart on him as he's rolling underneath this giant. So the giant, a hill giant, wearing nothing but a loincloth, and I'm describing in disgusting detail how this giant farts on him, or farts in his direction as he's rolling under. And he loved it. He gave one of those high-pitched squealy laughs, which is always fun to see. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun. A lot of fun with that one. And the town that they wound up in, and I was planning on this beforehand. In fact, if he had run away from the giant, it would have come back again to where he might want to face it. But the first town that they arrived to was not far away from that encounter. And I had originally written it so that the giant would come in the night if they try to rest there. And so he would be fighting the giant again in a town that has been sort of besieged by this giant every night. But it turns out he defeated the giant before even getting there, so I didn't have to have that final battle. Next week, actually, on the stream, on Saturday Morning Wartoons on Saturday, the giant was not working of its own accord when harassing this village. It was brought there, lured there, or enticed there by some other entity. So we'll kind of explore that, because Tristan is already going to have to go off and face off against whatever this entity is, because we've already set that in motion. There is still more happening in this village that he is going to have to sort of uncover. One thing I know Tristan likes is the mystery element of D&D. He likes to uncover the story as he goes. And so we're going to kind of explore this small town as a side quest, really, and see what comes of that. So yeah, that'll be fun. One key moment, let me see here. Yeah. So another note that I took here is I wanted to show the effects of his actions in the world that he's in, to really try to connect him to the story and the other characters in this world. I wanted him to have a moment where he could really empathize with one of the other characters, someone he had just met. So when he arrives in the town, as night is falling, I kind of described to him that he looks out and there are lights coming from the village that he can see. And as he gets closer, it's getting darker. I don't know if I described this as well as I wanted to during the game, but when he arrives, there's just a single solitary building, like a outfitter's store, with a residence upstairs. It's the only house that seems to be occupied because there's a light on upstairs. And I didn't describe it to him. It didn't really come out in the course of the storytelling element, but what I intended was, this was a victim of that giant. Her whole family was killed by this giant, including a child. Because part of this fantasy storytelling, and I know that's pretty dark for just me playing with my kid, but I mean, if it was another type of game with other kids and things like that, I don't think I would have had anything this dark as far as story-wise. But I decided to go with it because I have a pretty good understanding about his ability to feel for others, and also his ability to separate reality from fiction at the end of it all. But I wanted to draw him in to feel for somebody else. And especially right now, I think for me personally, been feeling a lot of things over the last week, and I think emotional learning can be very important for kids. And so playing a game with kids, I really want to make sure that they feel empathy and sympathy and all of these different things for other characters in the world as a way to draw them into the story, and also to help them carry that outside of the game. Because a lot of times when you play with kids, and I've been doing it for a few years now, and I see they get into the game, they get into the combat and things like that, but part of role play, for me at least, is the emotion that comes with it. So trying to connect emotion into a game can really draw players into the story. So when they feel something, it draws them that much more in. And so that's sort of what I wanted to do with that. So in this moment, he is upstairs with this woman, a halfling woman, and she tells him about the bell that was used to signal to the rest of the town. So when they got there, he told her that they had defeated the giant. And he had no idea that the giant had been tormenting these people. But she runs up and she starts ringing a bell, and just ringing it and ringing it. And suddenly all these townspeople start showing up. And so later, he learns from her that the bell was to signal the rest of the town. 2 rings means the giant is here. Ding, ding, the giant's come. 1 ring means I have nowhere to go. The giants found me. The bell ringer is dead. And so this may come out in next week's story, but she took over the bell ringing duty from one of the other villagers who was killed. So she took over this duty. She didn't want it, but she took over because she had already lost everything. And she wanted to be the next target for the giant so that she could spare the town and also spare herself the pain of going on without a family. One thing we've been talking to Tristan about, and this is out of the game, just father-son sort of stuff, is how people deal with their emotions. And one thing that comes up, and something that I've been trying to teach him a lot about, is there are people who face very hard times in their life, and they have a hard time dealing with their emotions. And it's hard to convey to a kid what that looks like in reality just by telling them about it. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for him to really feel something for another person who has lost a lot. Now, as in our family, we've had hard times and things like that. We've gone through hard times, but a lot of that gets, a lot of us protect our kids from that sort of thing. And so I figured doing it in a game would be a good way to kind of show him what that would look like or what that feels like. And I think it really connected with him. You can see it for yourself on the stream. He gets very quiet and he listens. Tristan loves to talk. A lot of times when I'm talking in game, describing things, telling him things that NPCs are saying or doing, he is trying to talk back to me, interrupting, which I mind sometimes, but not that much. But when he's interrupting and stuff like that, but in this moment, he just stopped. He was in stunned silence, and I could just see this change in him. He really connected emotionally with this imaginary character, especially when I mentioned that one of the beds in her house was smaller than the others, and he just put that piece together. He's like, it's a kid. She had a kid, and I thought that was a really impactful moment, both in and out of game for him. And so he now has a purpose to help fight the evils in the world on behalf of these people. And there's still one more little place that he's got to go to help this village out. And we'll see how that goes next week. So anyway, thank you if you tuned in to check this out. I'll be doing more of these and kind of doing an analysis of the game. There wasn't a whole lot technically to break down from this last session. I think a lot of it is more story driven anyway. But if we end up with different types of combats and things like that, I might get into more technical elements of the game. So if you want to check us out, you can visit beholdgamers.com. I think it's right down here underneath my picture. You can also follow us on Twitch right here, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those were Behold Gamers. YouTube, we don't have a personal URL there yet. Be sure to share whatever links you have with people you know in the D&D, nerd, fantasy community, tabletop, whatever. And yeah, thank you for checking us out.